Welcome everybody to WiseTake.com MMA DFS podcast. I'm your host Jeff, aka WigSpitter. Today we're going to be going over UFC Fight Night London, Werdum versus Volkov. It's a pretty interesting card. The challenge is not all the Vegas odds have been released yet, so we're sort of going off of just DK pricing, which is no big deal. The fight is going to play out the way it plays out. On the first fight of the Fight Pass prelims, this is a UFC Fight Pass only card, by the way. If you haven't purchased the UFC Fight Night, I believe you can get in and watch it for free. You just have to remember to cancel your subscription afterwards. But the first fight is Nasrat Haqparast versus Nadim Niramani. Haqparast is 8,300 salary on DraftKings. Niramani's salary 7,900. There's no odds for this fight that I could find. Haqparast is coming off of a loss from Marshman. He has strong power in his left hand. He has pretty decent takedown defense. He got grinded out basically after he couldn't knock Marcin Held out. Narimani, on the other hand, very technical striker. He's well-rounded, good grappling, solid cardio. He's making his UFC debut. I think this is going to be a good fight, very, very evenly matched. If you're going to build, I think I give the slight edge to Haqparast just because of the power. But I do feel Narimani could edge out a victory here. He does have submission skills, so it could be possible that he could work for a submission against Haqparast. For your DK lineup, I'm sort of apprehensive when it comes to guys making their UFC debut. It's sort of hit and miss on them, depending on how they fight in front of on the big screen, in front of a huge crowd. It's sort of 50-50. But both these guys' salaries are fairly comparable. But I think from a roster build, I'm not sure if these guys are going to make my player pool. But it looks like it's a pretty intriguing fight. Moving on to the next fight, we have Mark Godbeer versus Dmitry Sosnovsky. Godbeer has fought in the UFC before. He's coming off of it was a DQ win. Walt Harris, I believe, hit him with a high head kick after the referee called for a break. He landed a head kick to Godbeer, and Godbeer didn't continue or couldn't continue, and he was awarded the victory because of the illegal kick. But Godbeer is one of those. He's like a boxer. He's a decent striker. He's come forward. Doesn't seem very athletic. Sort of lumbers in the cage. Does have grappling issues. His takedown defense is suspect. Sosnovsky, on the other hand, he's making his UFC debut. He's coming off a 3-year layoff. If you look at his fight video, dude looked like he was pretty big. So he's been signed for a while. He's had to pull out of cards before for undisclosed injuries. I'm not sure why, but well, let's see if he makes it to if he can make it to fight day. That'll be this should be a good fight. I mean, heavyweights are always fun to watch. I mean, somebody's either going to go to sleep or they're going to get tapped out. Sosnovsky is he's a strong striker. He's a gritty type fighter. He'll grind you into the cage, work for takedowns. He has very good leg kicks. Like I mentioned before, he does have a grinding type style. Once he does get you down, he has a very solid top control. So he's going to grind you into the mat. Just work for side control, different positions, ground and pound. This is going to be an interesting fight. Godbeer's salary is $7,500. Sozanovsky's salary is $8,700. There's no odds for this fight either. I usually go off of Five Dimes or Bovada. I couldn't find any odds for these guys as of this recording. So when it comes to roster building, like I said, I'm a little apprehensive when it comes to guys making their debut. But heavyweights, on the other hand, I love the big guys, man, knocking people out or tapping them out. And I think this could have this has an opportunity to either be a snooze fest or it could be a pretty quick fight. I'm liking both these guys for GPPs just because of the stopping upside. Moving on to the next fight, we have Stevie Ray versus Cajun Johnson. Cajun Johnson is he's an interesting guy. Outside the ring, he's working on opening up different fight clubs. Like MMA clubs for the UFC. I think it's UFC. I can't remember what town it's in, but he's opening up a new gym. He's also working with Leslie Smith, spearheading, like trying to get the UFC union going, I believe. Stevie Ray is he's coming off of a long layoff from a devastating loss to Paul Felder. That was a brutal knockout. Stevie Ray's salary on DraftKings is $8,400. Cajun Johnson is $7,800. There's no odds on this fight either, as at the time of this recording. So just going off the pricing, it looks like Stevie Ray's favored, and Cajun Johnson is the slight underdog. But Cajun Johnson technically has evolved his fighting game. When he first came into the UFC, he was sort of like a come forward, wild striker. Now he uses his movement. He uses a lot of in and out, sticking and moving. He uses a lot of his leg kicks to get in, try not to get hit as much. He has very good takedown defense. I have a feeling this is going to be a good fight. I'm leaning a little more Cajun Johnson just because of his evolving fighting style as of late, and I think his little bit of a beef that he has with UFC is probably inspiring him to fight a little bit harder. So let's move on to the next fight. It's another fight on the undercard. It's Paul Craig versus Magomed Ankalaev. Ankalaev is making his UFC debut. He's another typical Russian fighter. He has insane ground and pound. He has good stand-up, very patient. His takedown defense appears to be very good. He has solid takedowns. He's either going to go to a decision or he's going to knock you out in his nine fights. Paul Craig, on the other hand, he's a decent grappler, does have submission skills, but he does tend to get hit a lot. He had a pretty bad loss in his last fight, and I think he's coming back a little too soon. But I'm going to lead with this guy Akol making his UFC debut for my roster build. He's 9,200 on DraftKings. Paul Craig is 7,000. I think these guys are just on two different levels. I think Paul Craig might be on the way out, and Akol might be, looking to springboard his way into the big stage. So there is Vegas odds for this fight. Akol is a 520 favorite. Paul Craig is a 380 underdog. So, all right, let's move on to the next fight. We have Danny Henry going up against Hakeem Dawodu. Henry's salary is $6,800. He's a plus 250 underdog. Dawodu is $9,400 salary. He's a minus 325 favorite. Dawodu is another guy making his UFC debut, going up against a pretty gritty fighter, a grinding type fighter like Danny Henry. Danny Henry has very technical strikes. He's a come forward. He has a lot of come forward movement. He absorbs a lot of damage. If he's able to take you down, he has solid ground and pound. He has submitted guys with a rear naked choke, so that's something you have to watch out for. Now, if Dewadu comes into the cage and he's sort of tentative, or maybe the lights of the big stage, maybe psychs him out, could be, a big day for the underdog. Dewadu, from the film that I was able to see, is very athletic. He has explosive punching power. He has huge and heavy combinations to the body. Very heavy leg kicks. His grappling is very suspect. When he does get taken down, he sort of struggles. But he does have very good cardio. But his punching power is what's going to, if he can keep the fight standing, Danny Henry could be in trouble. This has a lot of GPP potential on it, especially with Danny Henry's salary at $6,800. If he pulls off the upset, I mean, you can be sitting pretty heavy on the up in the marks. But let's move on to the next fight. It's Jack Marshman versus Bradley Scott. Marshman, his salary is $9,100. He's a minus 355 favorite. Bradley Scott, $7,100 salary. He's a plus 265 underdog. Marshman he's 2-2 in the UFC. He's strong. He has strong punching power. He has technical striking. His grappling is below average. His takedown defense is suspect. He has very heavy strikes in the first round and a half, and then he tends to slow down as the fight goes on. Bradley Scott he's 3-4 in the UFC. He has come forward pressure. He does eat a lot of shots as well. Both these guys have have very suspect defense, but he does have good cardio, and he's a grinding type fighter. So what he's going to do is probably push. If he could push Marshman up to the cage, work him and cage fight him, basically run Marshman's gas tank out, and then work for the takedown, and work for top control, and just make Marshman's night a long one. Bradley Scott could be some value in a GPP. Marshman, if he's able to connect, it's a good possibility. With that power early, he has that good chance of having that first or second round finish. So Marshman is definitely GPP viable. But let's move on to the next fight. Danny Roberts versus Oliver Enkamp. Danny Hot Chocolate Roberts is 3-2 in the UFC. He's a technical striker. He has good power. The only thing is he tends to be repetitive with his striking. Like if he throws his combos, it tends to be the same combo every time. So it makes him a little bit predictable. And he does gas as the fight goes on. If he is pushed up against the cage, it tends to wear him out as well. Oliver Enkamp, he's 0-1 in the UFC. Let me regress slightly. Danny Roberts is coming off of a horrible knockout loss to Nadim Taleb. Oliver Enkamp is coming off of a loss to Nadim Taleb that he went to decision. So, not that MMA math is working in either's favor, but Danny Roberts was knocked out, and it was a pretty brutal one. And I believe that was only like 3 months ago, not too long ago. So, I mean, that was a life-changing knockout. I mean, he crumbled against the cage. So, I think Oliver Enkamp is in a position where he has a good chance of winning. He's a very flashy striker. He has very good grappling. He throws a wide variety of spinning kicks and punches. So if he grinds Danny up against the cage, it could be a good fight, because Oliver Enkamp could use his like some dirty boxing, some heavy knees in the clinch, just nasty fighting up close and personal. Robert's salary is $8,500. Enkamp's salary is $7,700, and he's a plus. Roberts is a minus 180 favorite, and Enkamp is a 150 underdog. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure if Roberts or Enkamp would make my my player pool. If Enkamp did make it into the player pool, it'd be more for GPP. He's not very safe for cash, but I have a little bit of apprehension when it comes to rostering Danny Roberts. just how brutal that KO loss was, especially for DraftKings. All right, so moving on to the next fight, we have John Phillips. He's the white Mike Tyson, going up against Charles Byrd. He has 2 wins in the Dana White's Contender Series. He's a freaky fast striker with strong power, good takedowns. He has very slick submission skills. John Phillips is one of those. He's a brawler. He's going to like to fight in a phone booth. He likes fighting at close range. He has 0 grappling skills basically, and it's going to be one of those. I think he actually did have a submission victory against somebody. I can't remember the guy's name, but I mean, it's not like it's impossible for him to pull it off, but I think Byrd has the advantage with the speed and athleticism. I'm leaning more, if Byrd can avoid the power strikes and possibly grind this fight out into the mat, I think Phillips will be a fish out of water, and it'll just be a long night for him. I'm leaning more Byrd for GPPs. Phillips, making his UFC debut, he probably is going to want to try to put on a show, and I think if he can land the shot, I mean, it's a good possibility he can knock anybody out. I mean, he does have solid power, so that's it for that one. Let's move on to the main card. That was the last fight on the prelims. The first fight on the main card is Leon Edwards, which is a very intriguing fight. Leon Edwards, his salary is $8,800. He's going up against Peter Sebata, $7,400 salary on DraftKings. He's a plus 175 underdog. Edwards is a minus 210 favorite. Edwards, he's evolved into a well-rounded fighter. He has very fast strikes. He has good takedowns, solid top control. He's more of a point fighter as opposed to a finisher. Sebata, on the other hand, this is his second stint in the UFC. Since coming back, initially he was when he first came to the UFC, he was more of a BJJ specialist, so he tried to take people down, submit them. As he's come back, he's beaten some pretty good guys like Vicente Luque, Brian Barberena. So he has very improved striking. He has vicious leg kicks. He has nasty takedowns. He has very good cardio. So this is a very interesting fight. Leon Edwards is probably going to want to try to keep this fight standing at a distance and avoid being taken down, or he's going to just grind it out. He's going to probably point fight him, probably keep the fight, pushing him up against the cage. If this fight goes to the decision, I think Leon Edwards might squeak it out, but I'm not sure if, for a roster standpoint for DraftKings, at $8,800, I'd rather look for the couple of $100 extra bucks. Leon Edwards could be lower owned, and Sebata is definitely GPP worthy. But yeah, I'm not sure yet on who's going to make my roster build yet. Moving on to the next fight, we have Tom Duquesnoy versus Terrion Ware. Terrion Ware, he's been I feel bad for this guy, man. He's a pretty decent fighter. He's a come forward striker. He has below average takedown defense. He just tends to, I don't know, like he seems like he wants to point fight, but at the same time he should be better at what he's doing. I'm not sure if it's just the opponent that he's fighting, but Tom Duquesnoy, he's a very technical, athletic striker. He has solid striking power. He has nasty clinch game. He has heavy elbows and dirty boxing, knees in the clinch. He has good grappling. He has average takedowns, actually below average takedown defense. He has solid takedowns. He doesn't necessarily use it as much as he uses it more maybe defensively. But I think if this fight stays standing, I think Duquesnoy has the clear advantage here. Excuse me. Duganwa's salary is 9,300. He's a minus 280 favorite. Taryn Ware's salary is 6,900. He's a plus 240 underdog. Duganwa's salary is way up there. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to fit him in. And if this fight goes to decision, I don't see. Unless he's able to land multiple takedowns and just grind Taryn Ware out, because Taryn Ware is fairly durable. I'm not sure if Duganwa can pay off his salary unless he gets an early finish at 9,300. I could probably want to find better salary placement elsewhere. Moving on to the co-main events, we have Jimmy Manawa going up against Jan Blachowicz. This is actually a repeat of a fight from, I believe, 3 years ago. Manawa, I think, won the decision. Manawa is older. He's 38 years old. He has explosive knockout power. He uses leg kicks to slow down his opponents. He uses it to make sure that these guys, aren't moving around as much, and to make them more stationary target, so he can just unload on them. He has a nasty clinch game. He has very heavy elbows and uppercuts in the clinch, knees. He has average grappling. His takedown defense is decent. Jan Blachowicz, he's looked pretty jacked recently. I'm not sure, if he's just growing and he's just has a better diet, but he's looked a lot better. If you look at his from his earlier fights, he looked a little frail for the weight class. Light heavyweight, he looked a little skinny, but he's filling out pretty good, so he's probably on a good diet. Very solid striker. He has good takedowns. Has a lot of good cage pressure. He has slick submission skills against Devin Clark. He got him with a bulldog choke. But Devin Clark, his fight IQ isn't necessarily very good. Manawa's salary is 9,000. He's a minus 210 favorite. Blachowicz is salary 7,200. He's a plus 175 underdog. I think for a GPP, I think Blachowicz is definitely viable. He's going to allow you to get some of these higher priced guys. Manawa, his chin's a little suspect, so I'm not sure if I'm willing to roster him, but he's definitely GPP viable. I'm not sure how this fight plays out, because both these guys, when they first fought, they were very tentative. It just was a very It just was not a very good fight, to say the least. Moving on to the last fight, the main event, we have Fabricio Werdum versus Alexander Volkov. If you follow MMA at all, you realize that Werdum is a world-class grappler. I mean, he could submit anybody. The one big hole in his game is that his fighting style is awkward. I mean, he has this he blitzes in, which leaves him open for a counter punch, which if you watch the highlight of his fight with Stipe Miocic, you just see Fabricio running in and then Stipe just catching him with the moving backward straight jab and just planting him out. But ever since then, he's walked through his last few opponents. Now Volkov, on the other hand, he's 3-0 in the UFC. He has a grinding type fighter. Solid punching power. I wouldn't say like knockout power, but he has decent power. He has very good kicks to the body. Fights well at distance. He has very good grappling. I'm not sure if you would want to take Werdum down because that would just play right into Fabricio's wheelhouse, being a world-class Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu expert. Werdum's salary at 8,600 is very workable, and he could easily submit anybody. Volkov, his salary 7,600. He's a plus 170 underdog. Werdum is a minus 200 favorite. I like this fight. definitely for GPP, you could easily have if you start out, if you're leaning toward Werdum, start a Werdum line and then start a Volkov line. If you're going to do multiple lines, that's how I would work it. This definitely isn't a cash. I don't think Volkov is unless he can get the finish. I don't see him being cash viable. He's definitely GPP worthy. But that's it for UFC Fight Night London. Werdum versus Volkov. Quick recap. I'm leaning more Hawkross to win, Sosnovsky to win, Cajun Johnson to win, Ankalaev to win, Dewadu to win, Bradley Scott to win, Ankamp to win, Charles Byrd to win, Sebata to win, Dukanwa to win, Manawa, Blachowicz. I'm gonna lean Jan just because I think he's just a younger, fresher fighter on a different. I think they're both going in different directions when it comes to their fight path. So Blachowicz over Manawa, and then Werdum over Volkov. I think second round submission. So that wraps it up for UFC Fight Night London. Hit me up on Twitter. I'm always available. If you are not a Wise Taste subscriber, these are all just first look impressions. I'm not set on who I'm picking so far. I'm just giving you who I think is going to win initially. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to me jabber on about DraftKings lineups. Thank you again. If you are not, like I said, if you're not a Wisestream subscriber, we have event passes for UFC fight events for DraftKings. This is going to be the last event for a couple of weeks. The next event is going to be in about 2.5 weeks after this one. The event pass is only $4.99. You'll gain access to my premium article detailing who I'm going to pick for GPPs and cash, who are my locks. Also, you'll be able to gain access to the chat, which allows you to have full access to me. There's a whole bunch of guys in there, CBJR, Second to None. All these guys are in there chatting it up all the time about MMA, especially for the couple days right before the event. It's a fun place to learn and grow DFS-wise. But yeah. We also have a lot of other sports, so come join the fun. Come join the nation. Everybody's winning money, and everybody's having fun. As always, be safe out there and make that money.